Win big in 2023 with Team Sync from RotoBaller. Import your fantasy teams and sync your leagues. Get customized tools and tailored advice for your specific rosters and scoring settings, including live recommendations from the live draft assistant, free agent finder, and lineup optimizer. Sync an unlimited amount of NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL fantasy teams from all of the major fantasy platforms. Get a discount for any premium pass using my promo code Knuckler, Knuckler, one who throws knuckleballs. Just visit rotoballer.com/radio and start rotoballing like a boss. By the way, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or delete the DraftKings and FanDuel app. Those aren't video games. That's reality, friend. And what's up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 101 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Tap that. We are looking forward to UFC 290 this weekend. And with me today to discuss the pay-per-view event on Saturday at 6 p.m., he was with me here last week when we talked to Shoney, Mr. International Carter. Give it up for Connor Bones Slone. Connor, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me again, Brady. Definitely happy to be back and looking forward to this weekend.
Dude, this card is like dripping with so many really awesome fights, and then like everybody is gonna care about some of the weirder ones on here. And folks, by the way, because the card is at 6 p.m., I'll be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord doing the weekly DFS/sports betting Q&A from 4 to 5 p.m. Come in there, talk about DFS and betting on this card. We do have PFL Europe also on Saturday. I make picks for that kind of stuff, and boxing and one, and Bellator. On Twitter at RotoBrady. You can follow and subscribe on Facebook and YouTube at Tap That MMA Podcast, or it might just be Tap That Podcast. Try both. Anyway, Connor, there's 14 fights on this card, 2 title fights. Before we make any picks, what's your favorite fight on this card?
Ooh, that is a tough one. I mean, part of me wants to say the main event just because, Volk is such a dominant champion. He's so good, but Yair just really brings that X factor. He's just got such a weird style. He has really good kicks, and that's something that Volkanovski has not really struggled with in the past, but something that his opponents have had some success with is those kicks. So, I mean, that's a really easy one to pick. But if I'm thinking just outside the main event, I probably got to go with Robert Whitaker and Dracus du Plessis. I mean, that's just going to be, I think that's just going to be a very dominant win from Whitaker, and I'm always happy to see
a murder
that.
Is what it's going to be.
But I mean, it is an interesting story. Du Plessis is on a 7-fight win streak. No one's really been able to stop him, so just can't wait to see Whitaker take care of it.
All right, folks. Well, I'm going to name off what the 14 fights are and what weight class. Then we're going to get in picking from top to bottom this time, as we do on picks episodes when Connor Bones Slone is here. Starting off the card, a lightweight matchup between Kamela Kurt and Esteban Ribovic. At flyweight, Shannon Ross versus Jesus Aguilar. At bantamweight, Cameron Simon against Terrence Mitchell. Light heavyweight, undefeated 8-0 Vitor Petrino against Marcin Prachnio. Edgar Chairez in a 130 catchweight bout against my favorite prospect that I've seen in a long time, 13-0 Tatsuro Taira. Light heavyweight, Jimmy Crute against Alonzo Menifield. Desperation dripping off of that light heavyweight matchup. At strawweight, Yasmin Uruguay against Denise Gomez. Welterweight, Jack Della Maddalena, JDM against undefeated 7-0 Josiah Harrell. Welterweight, a banger, Robbie Lawler, Nico Price. Enough said. Middleweight, Bo Nickal, who was supposed to fight Tresean Gore. By the way, Manel Kape was also supposed to be on this card fighting Davison Figueiredo. That card got canceled. And as you know, JDM was supposed to fight Sean Brady. Those are 3 fights that I am so disappointed are not happening on this card. I love Starboy. Middleweight, Bo Nickal, undefeated at 4-0, taking on Valentine Woodburn. Lightweight, Dan Hangman Hooker, who I have a cameo from on my computer, courtesy of Connor Bones Slone, against Jalen Turner. Robert Whitaker, as Connor mentioned, at middleweight against Dricus du Plessis. The UFC Flyweight Championship between Brandon Moreno and Alexander Pantoja, and the UFC Featherweight Championship in the pay-per-view main event in the T-Mobile Arena, Alexander Volkanovski against Yair Rodriguez. Connor, just to get into it from the vibe perspective on this main event, this seems like a fight that obviously, Volkanovski is the minus 350 favorite. That is well within reason if you're just on paper handicapping this fight. But a part of me is really concerned that he's coming off that decision loss to Islam Makhachev that a lot of people, including think he should have won. And, regardless of what you think of the scoring of that takes a toll on people, and it can change the course of your career to go up and weight, fight the champion, that prepare the way that you do, and take a loss over the course of 5 rounds. It just seems like, at this point after that, what could he possibly be afraid of from Yair Rodriguez, even though there is plenty that he should be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting matchup. And one thing, kind of to your point, I wonder how much he really bulked up for that fight with Islam Makhachev. I mean, if he just kind of kept his weight where it usually is, then I don't think it'll have that much of an effect on him. But who knows? Maybe if he put on even a couple pounds, might make that weight cut for this weekend just that much more difficult. That being said, I do think Yair Rodriguez poses a pretty significant threat to him just from his unconventional style. Like, how can you prepare for that? How can you prepare for back elbows and switching jump kicks and just all the crazy stuff that Yair does?
And because of all those variables in this fight, I wouldn't be shocked if Alexander Volkanovski dominated him in every round, through 5. I wouldn't be shocked if if it wasn't necessarily close on the judges' scorecards, throughout, a late point in the fight. But if Yair has Volk hurt, I wouldn't be shocked at all if we see Volk a little bit shook by something that Yair has to throw at him on Saturday.
Absolutely. And kind of the way I see it going down in my mind, and I could be really wrong here, but I think first couple rounds, Yair is going to come out really strong. He could slam some leg kicks into Volkanovski, slams some body kicks, and ultimately Volk is going to hang with him. But in the end, he'll kind of fall back on his wrestling and win through that avenue. I don't think he's going to separate himself much from Yair on the feet, but he is long. He's a good boxer, so guess we remains to be seen.
It's, I do have a problem with the fact that, before dating back to October of 2019, Yair has 3 wins and a loss to Max Holloway. One was against Jeremy Stevens. That doesn't mean a whole lot now. Brian Ortega, who he knocked out, and credit to him on that. Ortega has been a little bit suspect in some of those losses he took a handful of years ago. And then Josh Emmett, who he subbed, very impressive. Volk, as much as I want to say that, I think Yair can mess it, and I think the circumstance of this coming off a fight against Islam, look what happened to Izzy, it kind of threw him off too, to go up to light heavyweight and then come back and prepare for that and lose. It's not the same thing weight-wise, but Volk beats Max Holloway, Chan Sung Young, who has plenty of unique stuff to throw out there as well. Holloway twice more, and Brian Ortega in between. Minus 350, I think that you have to think Volk is going to win the vast majority of these. I think that just his record, his track record, would have to say that he wins 75 to 80 to 85 of these out of 100. And I like it to go by decision. I think that Yair could survive what Volk has to throw at in terms of, if he's piecing him up in the volume on the feet. But Volk by decision plus 125, I don't hate that. But Yair by TKO knockout plus 550, that is the Hail Mary I think you're going with if you believe in Yair's chances.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best Hail Mary. And I do think Volk by decision is definitely very probable. Yair's got a really solid chin. And one thing I'm interested to kind of see how it plays out in this fight is Yair, his cardio has been a little bit hit and miss. If you remember when he fought Jeremy Stevens, won the first 2 rounds, did so pretty handily. kind of gassed in the third, and Jeremy Stevens won the third round. It was still a clear win for Yair. But then you look at that fight, and then his next fight back against Holloway, he goes 5 hard rounds with Max Holloway, the king of cardio. So, not trying to insinuate anything, but Yair is kind of known for giving USADA the slip. So if his cardio comes in on point, that'll be very interesting to me. It'll also be very interesting if he gasses after 2 rounds. I feel like it's really just kind of a toss-up with Yair.
There's one guy that you don't want to gas out against, and that is Alexander Volkanovski in the third round.
Oh yeah, and it makes me think back to the Brian Ortega fight when, Ortega almost subbed him twice in one round, but at the end of the round, Volkanovski was on top of him, just beating him senseless. Volk can his best avenue, his easiest avenue to a win is just
Connor,
taking him down.
Are you there?
Yeah.
All right, we're back. Sorry about that, folks. Connor, what were you saying to close out the discussion of the main event?
Can't remember exactly where I left off, but my major point was I think the easiest path to victory for Volkanovski, the least path of resistance, is going to be taking down Yair and doing some of the ground and pound that he's so capable of. So I do think Volkanovski by decision is a solid choice, and overall I'm leaning Volkanovski, but definitely not counting out Yair. I think he's got a solid chance, and excited to see how it plays out.
All right, let's move on to the co-main event, the UFC flyweight championship matchup between Brandon Moreno, the minus 225 favorite, and Alexander Pantoja, the plus 175 underdog. Connor, I love the flyweight division. I can't wait. When guys like Kai Kara France, as good as that, have had their opportunity and weren't able to get the title, yet this belt has, moved hands in the weirdest of ways over the last few years. And you got Manel Kopp kind of waiting in the way. There's so many good matchups to be made. And just a little bit ago, this is not a division that you would have called deep. And I think that's kind of starting to change.
Absolutely. This is by far one of my favorite divisions. I mean, they're so fast, they're so technical, their cardio is insane. I can't remember the last time I saw a boring flyweight fight. I'm very excited for this one, and I am kind of split on this. So, the logic in me says Pantoja's beat him twice. He's going to beat him a third time. But I have heard, and also I can imagine, beating someone 3 times is not an easy thing to do. So I don't know. It's a good matchup. I'm leaning Moreno, but Pantoja's beat him twice already. Very tough one. What do you think?
It's just like, it's so crazy to be in this circumstance where the guy with the belt has lost twice to the guy that, like, after so much time is finally getting this opportunity. And, 4 wins out of his last 5 fights. The only loss was to Askar Askarov back in July of 2020. But those wins came against Matt Schnell, Manel Kopp, Brandon Royval, and Alex Perez. A lot of, he finished 3 of those fights, before round 3. One with a neck crank. He's beaten the best that the flyweight division has to offer. Brandon Moreno, what are you going to do? Because that's how close the series was with Davison Figueiredo. That you had to do it so many times, and each time it was like, no, like the rules are off on these trilogies and these quartets. It's like usually when someone like wins the second, it means they're going to win the third. But I like that we're kind of seeing that rhythm change like throughout the UFC. It's becoming a little less predictable in that sense, but he's coming off a 2-fight winning streak where he got, I believe, the interim championship against Kai Kara France back in July of 2022. And most recently knocked out Davison Figueiredo in the third round, January of this year on UFC 283. It is very hard to beat somebody 3 times. And the only sample size of a loss that we have for Brandon Moreno dating back to September of 2019, which was his fight after he lost to Alexander Pantoja, and was on a 3, that was a draw against Askar Askarov. But he had the losses to Sergio Pettis and Pantoja. The only losses he's been handed have been at the hands of Davison Figueiredo. And at the same time, Pantoja, going back to January of 2018, has a loss to Askar Askarov and a loss to Davison Figueiredo. Oh, God. He couldn't have Moreno's number that much, could he?
It's tough to say that he could have his number, that well, especially from so long ago. But, I'm sure he's evolved and gotten better as a fighter as well, as obviously Moreno has. I'm still leaning Moreno, but what are the odds on this one? I don't even know them.
Pantoja plus 175, Moreno minus 225. And now I kind of do have a problem with that because I don't think Moreno has gotten so much better than Pantoja that, like, I have to completely forget about the first two fights when Pantoja has only beaten killers and only lost to killers. And, but what are the odds too that, like, Pantoja wins this in like a really exciting 5-round decision and they end up running it back and doing a fourth immediately?
Oh, that would be insane. I mean, Moreno and uh, Figueiredo that was the first quadrology in the UFC, right?
Yeah. I
I
mean, yeah, well, who else would it have been?
and Pantoja and Moreno. It was the first time they fought. Was it on the Ultimate Fighter or no?
I think it was. Yeah, because I can't imagine that it was in the UFC and then on the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, a fourth fight with them would be absolutely insane. I'm not sure if it would count for a quadrology since technically the Ultimate Fighter is an exhibition match, but either way, that'd be absolutely insane. I mean, this could be a fun fight. I'm sure if it's really close and they run it back, it would be another great fight too.
And honestly, like, you know, I think Moreno maybe wins this fight 50 to 55 times out of 100. Just because I've seen him at a higher level, fighting for belts and in these bigger situations of late. And so, but based on that, I don't like him at minus 225. I still have to like Pantoja at plus 175. And I'm not, I think this fight's going to be pretty nuts. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that either guy gets finished. So plus 175 straight up, I'm very comfortable with. If I was going to pick someone to win, like by decision, I'd probably do Moreno by decision plus 150.
Yeah, I think Pantoja is definitely a very, very, very live dog here. Um, I think Moreno possibly by knockout or Pantoja by sub. What's the odds for Pantoja by sub?
Let's see here. Pantoja by some hit plus 425.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take a big risk, that's a interesting one to think about.
And next up, we have a middleweight matchup between Robert Whitaker minus 400 and Dricus du Plessis plus 300. Connor, Robert Whitaker, he's lost to one guy since February of 2014 in the UFC. And that guy's name was Israel Adesanya. He's coming off a win against Marvin Vettori where he absolutely roughed him up 74 to 33 in the striking. He's the one who got the takedown in that fight. But his last fight was September of 2022. But the other ones came against Kelvin Gastelum, Jared Cannonier, and Darren Till. That's what middleweight had to offer at the time. Activity has been a question for Whitaker. I will say that. Dricus du Plessis still knocks 5-0 in the UFC. And, the last 3 wins came against Brad Tavares, Darren Till, and Derek Brunson. I cannot fault him for the competition that he has been facing. And, pretty soon, it's rare to see a guy with so many question marks, I think, beat 3 opponents of that caliber in a row. But he looked like he was going to die at the end of that Derek Brunson fight. There were so many times where I thought Derek Brunson had him beat.
Yeah, that was a crazy fight, and don't get me wrong, my pick is for Whitaker through and through. But I will say I do think du Plessis is going to surprise some people, and hear me out on this. So, as he's said in the past, and as the commentators talk about on all of his fights, he has a severely messed up nose to where he claims he can't even breathe out of it. I mean, if you get that fixed, that's going to improve your cardio double overnight. So I think du Plessis, if he comes in with a functional nose, he's going to surprise people. He's still going to lose, but he's going to put up a better fight than I think people are kind of giving him credit for. So,
Is your prediction contingent on him fixing his nose, though?
oh, absolutely. If his nose isn't fixed, well, Whitaker's just going to go through him like a hot knife through butter.
Well, I mean, like, that's a problem if, like, they can't fix his nose. And I haven't heard any news about that, but, like, he still landed a combined, let's see, 157, 270 strikes combined against Tavares, Till, and Brunson. He even got 6 takedowns against Darren Till, which really at that point said a lot more about where Darren Till was at than Dricus du Plessis. But, okay, how do you think Whitaker wins this? I think it's by decision, but I think this could very possibly be a TKO if Dricus du Plessis gasses out against Robert Whitaker is not going to stop coming forward. There is not going to be room to breathe. So if you can't breathe out of your nose, that's going to be a damn problem, Dricus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've seen him say that he did get his nose fixed between now and his last fight. I mean, I'm not 100% sure. He could be lying. It could not really be that well fixed. I think Whitaker by decision is a safe bet. But like you said, if he comes in and his cardio is not there due to his nose or due to whatever the case, Whitaker's just going to eat him up and get him out of there with TKO.
And I think Whitaker wins this fight 80 times out of 100 right now.
Yeah,
I love Dricus, but this is a guy that is not on the plateau or the platform of Derek Brunson and Darren Till. This is a guy that occupied a tier of his own in the UFC middleweight division, an inch below Israel Adesanya for years. If Israel Adesanya didn't exist, we'd be talking about Robert Whitaker in the same exact light as we are Israel Adesanya at middleweight. So Whitaker by decision plus 200, that is a super bargain. That's my favorite prop of that fight.
Yeah, I might actually take that. I'm glad you told me the odds there. I had one final thought on this. Oh, what do you think's next for the division here? If Whitaker wins, do you think you give him a third title shot? Do you think you let Izzy try it out 205 and see what happens? You give Strickland a title shot? I mean, I can't imagine where the division's going to go from here. Any thoughts?
Oh my God. It's just so hard, like, to just, I mean, this is what I mean. Like, he occupied a tier of his own where it's like, all right, we know for a fact that he is not as good as Israel Adesanya. So, it takes like a lot of hanging around. It takes like Bisping level hanging around to be able to get that opportunity after so long. But there's a lot of interest. Like, Robert Whitaker, if you told me that he's the UFC middleweight champion in 3 years, I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Yeah.
That's the other thing about it. Yeah, there's guys like Dricus on their way up. The question right now, I think, is Dricus' ceiling. And if he looks competitive in this fight, I'll start to believe in that a lot more.
Yeah, very good point. I think it will be somewhat of a competitive fight. I think du Plessis will do a bit better than Vettori did, but I still think he'll get convincingly beat. The only final really thought I have for this fight, just middleweight in general, is do I want to see a fight between Israel Adesanya and Sean Strickland? Not really. Do I want to see a press conference between Israel Adesanya and Sean Strickland? Absolutely. That would be insane.
They already had some like really like cringy blows between. We've seen those videos. What did Sean? You're a grown man on Instagram, bro.
Sean, I think my favorite part was when he was talking about how Alex Pereira slept Izzy. And he was like, "Why don't you tell me what not to do, Izzy? You took a nap," and then he did the same thing.
And next up, it's a lightweight matchup between Jalen Turner and Dan the Hangman Hooker, who is the plus 225 underdog. Jalen Turner, the minus 275 favorite. Jalen Turner won 5 in a row between February of 2020 and July of 2022 before taking a loss to Matus Gamrot by split decision, granted. He did outstrike Matus 40-29. He got taken down 4 times, but he got a knockdown. Before that, he had wins over the likes of Eros Medic, Jamie Malarkey, and Brad Rydell. Dan Hooker has been doing a lot of losing. Lost 4 of his last 6 fights. Granted, those guys were named Dustin Poirier, Michael Chandler, Islam Makhachev, and Arnold Allen. Those wins came against Nasrat Haqparast, who he outstruck 73-27, took down 3 times, and last time out, coming off a win, November 2022, a second-round knockout victory over Claudio Puelles. Connor, we love Dan Hangman Hooker, and unfortunately, lightweight, I call it the James Vick rule, has long had these guys that it becomes their job to get knocked out by guys that are trying to make millions of dollars.
Yeah, this is a very interesting matchup, and nothing but love for Dan. As you mentioned earlier, he gave your podcast a shout out. You're welcome for that, by the way. Love Dan. He's a tough guy. I think his biggest problem is and always has been his speed. I mean, if you just look at some of the fights that he's had, like Edson Barbosa, for example, there is just a clear speed difference. And he's very, very tough. He's proved that time and time again. But I think Jalen's going to win here, probably a decision. But it's an interesting matchup at the very least. Jalen's really tall, has got some length. Looking at his highlights right now, and he does have pretty good speed. So I think he'll outshine Dan Hooker there, unfortunately. But hey, I've always been wrong before. What are your take? What's your take?
And, Jalen Turner will have the reach advantage. And I think that Jalen Turner is not a guy that you want to be slow against.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I can just see Jalen Turner outstrike, beating him in volume, beating him in the significance of the strikes that he's on. I don't think there's going to be necessarily a takedown in this fight. Maybe one on each other's end if it's opportunistic. But
Mm-hmm.
I think Dan Hooker is going to be looking to land a big shot. And I think Jalen Turner is going to be looking to pick Dan Hooker apart. And I think Jalen Turner is going to be the one who's successful. Jalen Turner, I think, wins this fight 70 to 75 times out of 100. I hate to say
I, I gotta agree. And like I said, I'm watching his highlights right now, specifically his fight against Brock Weaver. And man, he looks crisp. His boxing is crisp. He's fast. Definitely taking Turner in this one.
And so, minus 275. I'm not really touching a straight up victory here. But how do we say that Jalen Turner's been winning? I think you just go Turner maybe inside the distance. I think might be the best value, which is minus 160.
I think that's tough too.
Maybe plus 550 for decision isn't too bad. I mean, that's way more reward. And
Yeah.
I don't know that he's going to finish Dan Hooker.
I mean, Dan's just so tough, and it's very possible that the damage has accumulated a little bit, but he's not an easy guy to finish. I could definitely imagine him toughing out a decision loss here, but who knows?
Oh, Jalen Turner has never, all of his wins are inside the distance in the UFC.
I didn't know that. Okay, that's
Minus 160. Minus 160. That's not horrible, but maybe I don't touch anything on that fight.
Yeah,
I don't love any of the prices there. And speaking of not loving prices, Connor, next up, we have a middleweight matchup between one Bo Nickal, the hottest prospects in sliced bread, against Val Woodburn at middleweight. He was supposed to be fighting, who's it, Sean Brady? No, that was Jack Della Maddalena. Trayshawn Gore, who he would have torn apart also, I think. And that says more about Trayshawn than it does Bo at this point. But he's fighting Valentine Woodburn, who is 7-0, fighting out of Florida. And Bo Nickal, Connor, is the where is it? Minus 2,500 favorite. Val Woodburn, the plus 1,100 underdog.
that's so crazy.
And Val 7-0. He does look a little. He's 5'8" for middleweight, and all of his wins, 5 are by knockout, 2 by decision. He comes out of Combat Night Pro. He just got wins over 17-8 Wesley Martins and Luis Mello, both in 2022, though. He hasn't fought in 2023. It's just crazy to see, like, under these circumstances, like, they were like, all right, we can have Bo Nickal fight Trayshawn Gore, kind of recognizable dude. And then Trayshawn Gore is out, and they're like, all right, anybody who is going to make Bo Nickal look good on a pay-per-view.
So, fun fact.
Not trying to be mean to Val Woodburn, because, like, that's some massive disrespect from Vegas based on a very little sample size from both guys.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I do think Bo's going to win. But at the same time, he's had 4 professional fights. Anything could happen. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to completely count Woodburn out. I did watch some of his highlights. He is a big power puncher. He may have a puncher's chance. I mean, if he can connect before Bo takes him down, maybe Bo doesn't know how to react when he gets rocked. Maybe he gets rocked and just completely forgets the game plan, and somehow Val pulls out an upset. So, I mean, I do think Bo's probably going to not have any issue dispatching this guy, but hey, I'd never say never.
I mean, it's not insignificant that, I mean, we said this too, probably in Chris Matinho versus Sugar Sean O'Malley, but it's not insignificant that a prospect is getting ready for a bigger fight when they're this hyped, like Bo Nickal is on a pay-per-view card, and then your opponent changes kind of last second, and you're fighting a guy that is not famous. He's brand new to the UFC, and you're probably looking past him.
Yeah.
I can't ignore that. And on the flip side, Val Woodburn is going to be super motivated to put on a show. Whether he has the talent to do so, we don't know. But Connor, Nickal by submission in round 1, that's minus 118.
I mean, it's not that bad of a bet, but Bo also has some power. So, he could get a TKO, could just mount him and rain down blows. So I would be super confident in betting this one. I mean, shoot, might throw $10 on Woodburn though, because just why not?
And the other one, Connor, as you said about TKO in round one, that's plus 280 for Nickal.
Ah, okay. That's interesting. Interesting. I'll have to do some contemplating on that one.
And I do think Nickal wins 90 to 95 of those fights out of 100. But I don't think that, that doesn't make Val Woodburn a bad value at plus
Mhm.
1100.
Yeah, and I mean, anything can happen, man. Anything can happen. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of hope that Woodburn pulls off an upset. Bo Nickal just didn't impress me with the way he won against Jamie Pickett. He didn't get him down, and then he kneed him in the groin, and then immediately got him down, and then wouldn't even acknowledge that he did it. All you got to say is, yeah, it was an accident. The ref didn't stop me. It's on him. And I would be like, okay, that's fair. But he wouldn't even admit it. Remind me of Frank Trigg.
Oh God, that you draw that comparison. That's brutal. At welterweight, Robbie Lawler against Nico Price, and Robbie Lawler is the plus 185 underdog. Nico Price the minus 225 favorite. That's not very surprising. That's pretty spot on, it seems. And Robbie has lost 5 of his last 6 fights. Granted, to RDA, Ben Askren, in a very suspect win by Ben Askren when he got outstruck 26-0. Colby Covington, Neil Magny, and Brian Barberena, his last time out, he got knocked out in the second round after getting outstruck 147-81. I believe I gave you that pick that week. And Nick Diaz was his one win by third round knockout September of 2021. Nico Price, not doing a whole lot better since July of 2019. He's had to fight good competition too. But a loss to Jeff Neal by second round knockout. The win came against James Vick. That doesn't mean anything for anybody nowadays. A third round knockout loss to Vicente Luque. The no contest with Donald Cerrone. The unanimous decision loss to Michel Pereira. And last time out, he got knocked out in the third round by Phil Rowe. Unfortunate too, because Nico Price was winning the striking bout at 110-63, at least in the numbers. Connor, Robbie Lawler was born in 1982. There's a big difference between being on this kind of losing streak, regardless of the level of competition, when you were born in 1982, as opposed to a rough streak when you were born in 1989 right now. And his last win is October of 2021 against Alex Oliveira. I think that this is probably. How do you think Nico Price wins this? Is that what you think is going to happen?
I think it's an interesting matchup, and I got a couple of points and a nice little anecdote here. But just to kind of start off, I think this is always one of the last things to go as fighters get older is hand speed. I think Robbie Lawler has a little bit better hand speed than Nico Price. Nico Price, he'll put in more work, he'll have more strikes, but he kind of suffers a little bit the same issue as Dan Hooker. He's just kind of slow to the punch sometimes. It favors him over the course of a 3-round fight, but it's not very good in the first round, round and a half. I do think Nico Price going to outwork him. Robbie Lawler has definitely had some issue lately with volume. I would probably, I think the safest bet is Nico Price by decision. Robbie's got a great chin. Nico's got some power, but it's not the same kind of power that someone like Brian Barberena has, for example. So I could definitely see Lawler toughing it out, getting to a decision. I do favor Nico Price. It would be kind of sad to see Robbie Lawler go off into the sunset on a loss, but that might just have to be the way it is.
I am concerned though. I don't know if he puts Robbie away. And, in his decision win over Alex Oliveira, he actually got outstruck 65-64. The more I think about this, and Nico Price is not Brian Barberena. When you really look at their recent track records, really not even close. And so Robbie by decision, plus 550. what the hell? Since both of these guys are on a tough losing patch, and because I sometimes give Nico Price more credit than I think he deserves because of the fantastic things that he has, the fun things he's done in the past. I think Robbie wins this fight maybe 40 to 45 times out of 100. So plus 105, I love him.
I think one thing to just consider is to think back to Lawler versus Barberena. Obviously, Lawler didn't end up winning, but man, he looked good in that first round and a half. He looked crisp. He was beating Barberena until Barberena just kind of took over in the later rounds. So I mean, I think if Robbie can kind of manage his cardio here, just have good defense and explode when he needs to, I could definitely see him sneak out and win somehow. I think it's a tough matchup for both guys. I think it's going to end up being a pretty close fight. I give the edge to Nico, but I think you're right. 40 to 45 times out of 100, Lawler could sneak away with the win.
And Connor, this next fight really shows, is this UFC 290 or some sort of Canelo Alvarez pay-per-view? Because we have another minus 1,000 plus or minus 1,000 or greater favorite in Jack Della Maddalena at minus 1,000 against Josiah Harrell plus 625. And again, JDM was supposed to be fighting Sean Brady, which would have been awesome. Jack Della Maddalena, winner of.
Okay. I got one real quick thing to say about Nico Price before we move forward. I'm sorry, I should have cut in a little bit earlier. When I saw Nico Price versus Phil Rowe live in UFC Orlando, I met some of his training teammates, and his nickname at the gym is Grandpa Price. So take that as you will.
I don't know how to take it, but I will. So Jack Della Maddalena, winner of all 5 fights in the UFC, if you count the Contender Series against Ane Lusa, Pete Rodriguez, Ramazan Emeev, Danny Roberts, and Randy Brown. He has finished all 4 fights inside the distance at the UFC level. Josiah Harrell, 7-0 as a professional, 24 years old, coming out of the state of Ohio, I do believe. Has 1 fight in LFA, 1 fight in Cage Fury. That is concerning. And his last win came against Mike Roberts, who was 9-8-1. Granted, he did knock him out in round 3, and that was in June of this year. So less than a month ago. Now he's fighting Jack Della Maddalena. Oh, that is not enough for Josiah Harrell. I don't. This is what makes me a little bit concerned about the Bo Nickal fight, is like, I have that fear against Bo Nickal. Like, is he taking this as seriously as he should? I think JDM is going to destroy Josiah Harrell. Just because I'm a little more intrigued. You know, like, Josiah Harrell's been in better promotions, but it's like, that's not, Jack Della Maddalena was expecting Sean Brady. He is ready to kill whoever's in front of him, if they're as good as Sean Brady. And so Josiah Harrell, I think, is going to be way overmatched. I think Jack Della Maddalena wins this 90 to 95 times out of 100.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made a couple great points. Jack Della Maddalena has definitely proved himself a little bit more in the UFC than Bo Nickal has. He's been in some real adversity too. You know, he was in a couple deep submissions that he managed to get his way out of and knock the guy out. And I'm gonna be honest, I can't even find any highlights on Josiah Harrell right now. I'm watching him train jiu-jitsu with his coach. I can't find any actual MMA highlights. That might be just because I'm looking wrong, but I think you're right. JDM is gonna come in. He is gonna put a beating on this guy, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your favorite fighters, I guess.
And Maddalena inside the distance, that's minus 400, not worth that. Maddalena by TKO knockout, minus 300. Let's find something worthwhile here. We can do it. All right, I think you got to go Maddalena in the first round.
Maddalena by DQ? Just kidding.
Yeah, Maddalena in round 1, minus 195. That's not horrible. And I think if you want to go Maddalena by TKO knockout in round 1, that's minus 107. Those are the 2 best values you're going to find here.
Yeah, that's just so crazy that it's that the odds are like that for a first round finish. But hey, I understand it. He's looked very, very sharp. So
isn't it crazy in some divisions where, like, there's such a mad dash to try to get the big wins, and especially on pay-per-view cards? It's like, was there nobody in this weight class that wanted to fight Jack Della Maddalena on short notice?
I mean, I think part of it, I could be wrong here, but I think part of it is the UFC just wants to save a couple bucks. They're like, okay, well, we could pay 25 and 25, or we could just pay some guy that we could sign the UFC today 12 and 12. That's 50% less than what we'd have to pay the other guy. I think that has to have some factor in it because I think you're right. There are probably a bunch of people that are just ready to take the fight on short notice when it's somebody like highly touted as JDM.
Yeah, yeah. Does anybody want to? Yeah, I want to fight Jack Della Maddalena. You got to think there'd be a lot of guys at 170 who might say that, but instead, we're probably going to get him to destroy Josiah Harrell. That's probably what we're going to get to see. And next up, a women's strawweight matchup between Yasmin Uruguay and Denise Gomez. Again, kind of surprising, but a widely handicapped fight. Denise Gomez, the plus 290 underdog. Yasmin is the minus 375 favorite. Yasmin, winner of 2 in a row, both at the UFC level. She outstruck was it Yasmin Lucindo? 86-66, winner by unanimous decision. And last time out, got a second round knockout against Estela Nunez December of last year. Denise Gomez, on the other hand, born in 1999, winner of 2 of her last 3, including the Contender Series, unanimous decision victory over Ryan Amanda. Outstruck her 103-55. Did get taken down once. And then Bruno Brazil, her last time out in April of this year, second round knockout, and outstruck Bruno 54-15. Took her down 3 times. I do have to give Yasmin credit that Estela Nunez and Yasmin Lucindo are 2 better wins than Denise Gomez has for sure.
Absolutely, and I think I'm leaning towards her getting the victory. She's undefeated. She's a very fast striker. I think she'll come out on top with this one.
And I think probably by decision. I don't think look what Loma did to Denise Gomez, outstruck her 48-19, took her down 4 times. Now, I don't know, I don't think Yasmin will have to get to any of that. But I do think that she can outstrike her kind of similar in a similar fashion that she did to Lucindo in the 86-66 range. And so Uruguay, who is the minus 375 favorite by decision, plus 100. I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
I think she wins 70-75 of these out of 100. I'm not touching a straight up victor here.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree. And I'm rewatching her fights with Lucindo, and man, she's sharp. She's sharp on the feet, but also, she is not taking too many risks. So, she's not necessarily going to be one of those do or die fighters that either gets a finish or gets finished. So I think by decision, plus 100 is a solid deal.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, hopefully she just doesn't, get out volume by Denise Gomez early, as Denise showed she could do in the Contender Series, and then be too slow to make up that difference.
Mm-hmm.
And next up, we have a light heavyweight matchup between Jimmy the Brute Crute against Alonzo Minifield. Very interesting situations for both of them coming into Alonzo Minifield plus 105. And actually, I'm probably wrong about that for Zoe. I often rag on him way more than I should. And Jimmy Crute, the minus 130 favorite. Just to confirm, let's start with Alonzo Minifield. He did have the draw with Jimmy Crute the last time out.
I forgot that happened.
By majority decision. 2 knockdowns for Alonzo, 56-31 on the striking, but he got taken down 6 times. That is exactly the kind of stat line you're expecting in a majority decision draw.
Yeah, very good point. And honestly, I don't even remember that fight. I may have to go rewatch it before I make a definitive prediction for this fight. I honestly initially am leaning toward Minifield. I think it's easier to improve your takedown defense in the period of time since they last fought, easier than it is to improve your chin and your striking defense. So, I mean, that could definitely vary per fighter, but that's just my first thoughts on it. So I'm taking Minifield here.
And I think it was the loss to William Knight and the win over Ed Herman that caused me to give Alonzo Minifield so much garbage. But coming in, before the draw with Jimmy Crute, first round knockout victories over Misha Serkinov and Askar Mozarov.
Askar, yeah, he's the guy that lied on his resume a little bit, wasn't he?
Yeah, hilarious. People should do that more. That's fun. And Minifield by TKO knockout plus 175. That's way better value than I thought. Do not be fooled by the fact that this fight went to the judges' scorecards and was really close the last time, because Alonzo Minifield knocked him down twice. And before that, had 2 first-round knockouts. Minifield in round 1 plus 340. Minifield by TKO knockout in round 1 plus 500. And Minifield by TKO knockout in round 2 plus 800. I think that's a decent value too. I think Jimmy Crute, hopefully he gets a little bit more adjusted. He had that rough stretch where, he lost to Jamal Hill, but he had that injury against Anthony Smith. It's just been a while since he's won. Over almost 3 years now since he won in the UFC, and that was against Modestas Bukauskas. Alonzo Minifield has proven himself more to me in that stretch of time. Jimmy Crute's getting knocked out, and I think Alonzo Minifield wins this fight 60 times out of 100. Hammer him overall at plus 105.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm definitely going to have to go rewatch their fight and look at those knockdowns, but completely agree. I definitely think Alonzo Menifield's going to get the knockout here. I wonder, what is it for round 1 knockout?
I think I said that was like plus 300.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I would pick around then. If anything, I'd just go Menifield by KO, TKO.
Yeah, plus 175. I think that's pretty much like betting on him to win anyway.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
And Connor, do you have to go, or do you want to talk about the Tatsuro Taira fight?
Honestly, I don't really know too much about these next fights on the early prelims. I'll kind of just defer to your best judgment here and have to give it a listen later. But let me tell you what, thank you for having me on again, and very excited for this weekend. We'll have to have another podcast and recap what happens on Saturday.
Oh, Jesus Christ. There's going to be a lot and so many good pay-per-views coming up as we hit the peak of summer. Connor, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Brady.
And folks, we will continue here with a 130-pound catchweight fight between Tatsuro Taira and Edgar Chairez. We have to go to the top of best fight odds now. And Tatsuro Taira, the minus 1,100 favorite. Chairez, the plus 675 underdog. Let us start with Edgar Chairez. 27 years old, has not been in the UFC. He has been in promotions like Combate Global, UWC, and Fury FC. Unfortunately, the 2 last opponents that he beat were 8-4 and 5-7 in those promotions. He did get a Contender Series loss to 5-0 Clayton Carpenter back in August of 2022. I don't think he's been knocked out. He has been submitted several times. Tatsuro Taira, 23 years old. He just happens to have won his last 2 fights in the UFC. As recent as February of this year, against 10-3-1 CJ Vergara and Jesus Aguilar by round 1 triangle armbar. Jesus Aguilar was 8-1 at the time. Folks, let's make this quick. I love Tatsuro Taira. Edgar Chairez, I love the promotions he's been in, but he hasn't done enough to show me that he belongs in the same octagon as Tatsuro Taira. Tatsuro Taira wins this fight, again, probably 90 to 95 times out of 100. I hate to see that so many times on a pay-per-view card, but Taira by submission, minus 225. Taira by submission in round 1, minus 118. I'm seeing that at plus 125 some places. That is as good as you are going to get for this fight when picking a prop. Next up, we got a light heavyweight matchup between Vitor Petrino and Marcin Prachnio. Prachnio is the plus 180 underdog. Vitor Petrino, the minus 250 favorite. Let us start with Vitor Petrino, 8-0 as a professional, 25 years old, with a 77-inch reach. He has a win at the Contender Series level against Rodolfo Bellato by 2nd round knockout, and a unanimous decision victory over Anton Turkalej, against whom he outstruck in 39 to 33, took him down 7 times to 5. That's, not a super significant. But then let's talk about Marcin Prachnio. February of 2023, he gets a unanimous decision victory over William Knight, who he outstruck 79 to 8. He has one loss to Felipe Lins, who he did outstrike 74-64, but he did get taken down 4 times. And Prochnio, the win, second round knockout win over Villanueva, that doesn't mean anything to me. And Khalil Roundtree was his other win, January of 2021. He outstruck him 102-49, beat him by unanimous decision. His other losses came to, Sam Alvey back in 2018. He did get knocked out too. That is concerning. Magomed Ankalaev and Mike Rodriguez. I was a little bit concerned. Maybe Vitor Petrino takes Marcin Prochnio down as many times as Felipe Lins did. Maybe he does it a little bit more. But Marcin Prochnio, I think, has striking volume that I think is going to give Vitor Petrino problems. So I think this fight is a little bit closer than it's being handicapped. I think Prochnio could win this fight 40 times out of 100, maybe even 45 or 50. Plus 190, I love him. And I love him to win by unanimous decision. I think the best value prop here is Prochnio by decision, plus 600. And Vitor, I don't think he knocks. I don't think he knocks Anton Turgale or Marcin Prochnio out. But I think that he's more likely of the two to win this by TKO knockout, and Petrino by TKO knockout is minus 129. The odds reflect what I'm saying. Next up, we got 3 fights to go. A bantamweight matchup between Cameron Simon and Terrence Mitchell. Simon, the minus 550 favorite. Terrence Mitchell, the plus 400 underdog. Cameron Simon, winner of 3 in a row at the UFC. He has looked fantastic. The last time out, that was a tough fight against Mana Martinez, who he outstruck 117-60. He got a takedown and a knockdown. The other wins: 3rd round TKOs against Stephen Kozlow and Joshua Wang Kim. The Mana Martinez win does have meaning, though. Terrence Mitchell has not debuted in the UFC. That is happening on Saturday. He is a 15-2 professional, 33 years old. All of his career wins come inside the distance, 8 submissions, 6 knockout. He does come to us via Alaska Combat Entertainment. Now, folks, he was on The Ultimate Fighter season 24. You want to know something crazy about Terrence Mitchell? He has a 1 loss in MMA since May of 2011. That loss was to Kai Kara France on The Ultimate Fighter. It's just crazy that besides then, so much time has passed for him in between so many fights, and now he comes to us as the Alaska Combat Entertainment Bantamweight Champion. That's crazy. Terrence Mitchell is something to be excited about. Cameron Simon has looked really good in the UFC, but I cannot ignore Terrence Mitchell's record, the fact that he was on The Ultimate Fighter and the fact that his only loss is to Kai Kara France in such a long time. There must be something crazy about this dude. I think off that alone, and the fact that Cameron Simon, what was it? That he's looked really good. I just questioned the first 2 opponents, and he had a little bit more problem with Mana Martinez, who, when you really look at it, has done a ton of losing in the UFC. That is enough of a question mark for me to say Terrence Mitchell can at least get 30 of these fights out of 100. Plus 400, that is beautiful. And, I think this is a fight where I might pick both guys to win inside the distance. Simon inside the distance, minus 275. Mitchell, plus 800 on the Mitchell train for UFC 290. And I love Cameron Simon, but Terrence Mitchell is just very interesting when you browse his resume. 2 fights left, a flyweight matchup between Shannon Ross and Jesus Aguilar. Jesus Aguilar, the minus 140 favorite, and Shannon Ross, a plus 115 underdog. Thank God we have a closely handicapped fight. Shannon Ross, loser of 2 in a row in the UFC. It's closely handicapped because they don't know which of these guys is going to lose. Knocked out twice by Vinicius Salvador in the Contender Series and Clayton Rodriguez February this year at UFC 284. Jesus Aguilar at least has 1 win. It was at the Contender Series level by 3rd round guillotine over Erison Ferreira. He did run into a buzzsaw his last time out, February of this year, a round 1 triangle armbar loss to Tatsuro Taira. I think I got to give the credit to Jesus Aguilar here. He has a win. His only loss is to Tatsuro Taira. What are you going to do about that? And, it's not like Shannon Ross has been, fighting, pure killers. They're guys that, for the most part, have recent wins over Shannon Ross, which doesn't seem to mean a lot. So, closely handicapped? I don't think so. Jesus Aguilar wins this fight 70 to 75 times out of 100, minus 140. I love it. And let's go Aguilar by submission, plus 280. I love it. And finally, we are on the last fight of the card. It's actually going to be the first fight. We went backwards tonight. A lightweight matchup between Kamela Kirk and Esteban Ribovic. Ribovic, the minus 155 favorite. Kamela Kirk, the plus 125 underdog. Let's start with Kamela. Loser at 2 of his last 3. He did lose to Billy Quarantillo on the Contender Series 4 years ago. His win in the UFC comes by unanimous decision to Makwan Amirkhani. He did get taken down 5 times by Makwan, and then his last time out against Damon Jackson, a round 2 submission loss, and that was in March of last year. Esteban Ribovic, 2 years younger, born in 1996. Oh, God. He did win in the Contender Series by first round knockout. Then he lost March of this year, so at least he fought recently. He outstruck Loik Radzhabov 66 to 40. He got a knockdown, but he was taken down 11 times. That's how you lose that fight. I don't know why this one is so closely handicapped. Esteban should clearly be the favorite. Esteban should be the favorite to win by knockout in pretty devastating fashion. Kamela Kirk, I'm not impressed by the win over Makwan Amirkhani when you get taken down 4 times, and that's not what Esteban's going to do. But in his loss to Radzhabov and getting a knockout in the Contender Series when, Kamela Kirk, he did lose to Billy Quarantillo, though. What stands out to me is that I think Esteban is going to win the volume striking battle, and I think that is going to determine the winner of this fight. And, with knockdowns in each of his last 2 fights, I think Kamela Kirk is going to be hurt, and I don't think he's going to survive. Esteban wins this fight 65 to 70 times out of 100, minus 155, easy money, and Ribovic by TKO knockout, plus 195. Hit it. Wish I had my sound drops. I'll try it once. And folks, that is it for episode 101 of RotoBallers official MMA podcast. Tap that. You can follow me on Twitter for all of my combat sports picks at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast and subscribe on Facebook and YouTube at Tap That MMA Podcast. I will be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord from 4 to 5 p.m. on Saturday doing the weekly DFS / sports betting Q&A. Unfortunately, the USFL season is over, so wait till next spring and check out my XFL and USFL gambling content. We have a bunch of exciting interlude episodes on the way. Stay tuned. Have a fun time watching the pay-per-view this weekend. Thanks for listening. Peace.